Okay, so welcome again to everybody, and then the ones that have joined after my last hello to you all. I'm Geert Vermeire, and together with Faye Stevens, we will be your hosts for tonight. So I would like to invite you to get to know each other, to start with, to write your name and the place where you are or where you're from in the chat. And as well as done already by many of you, to switch off your mic while we are doing the introduction. And after we open the discussion, you're welcome to talk as much as you want to. First of all, I would like to thank this great event, Landscape and Goodness, to host us, Faye and me, in this fire pit. First of all, I would like to tell something about me and about Earth stories, the stories we would like to share with you tonight. I'm a poet. I'm Belgian. For me, poetry is much more than writing on a piece of paper. It's a gesture, it's a caress. And I do it as well in the landscape. For me, writing and the landscape are inseparable. For me, walking is one of my main instruments in my writing practice, literally writing with the body. My approach to writing started actually to shift when I was invited by a curator of a museum in Belgium, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Ghent. He invited me to take part in an exhibition with visual artists. And I was astonished because I didn't see me in that moment as an artist, but as a writer. And I told him, what will I do with these 5 other so famous and so great visual artists? And he said to me, nothing, you just have to be there. Your presence will make the difference. And even if no work of you will be shown, that is enough to be part of the exhibition. So I started to think about it, that writing is actually not about making something, leaving something behind. And eventually I thought still about doing a contribution to the exhibition. And the exhibition that happened in a marvelous castle, very romantic place with a very big pond, a lake in front of it, in which there was a small island with a cabin for ducks. So on the opening night, the exhibition happened in the castle. I went by little boat, very adventurous, to the small island and went to sit down in the cabin for ducks, a very small little house. I had a small lamp on my forehead and I started to write. And people that were walking around, coming to the exhibition, over the big bridge, over this lake, the only thing they could see was in the middle of this lake, in the darkness, my both hands writing. So that was my beginning as a landscape artist. To show you how I developed this in the years after, I would like to show you 2 small clips, 2 Earth stories, like we call them. Maybe you can show the first clip, writing in water, or can share maybe you can share the link so you can have a look. It's a 1-minute clip.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see it. You can play it. Actually, I'm not writing in water, I'm writing in algae, I'm writing in weed. It's an interaction with nature, and that is the definition of an earth story. It's a short story you can express in words or in any other medium that shows an interaction with the natural environment, human, living being, animal being, or nature, as it is. For me, not interfering, gentleness is part of my artistic practice. And so with one more clip, I would like to go to the next part of our conversation, showing the kindness for the place in a performance I did in Berlin. Could you play the next little clip? Mm-hmm. This ended a bit more abruptly, but this performance was made in the Grunewald forest in Berlin, next to the Grunewald train station, and what seems to be an idyllic landscape has a horrible past. But from this exact spot, where is now the forest, the Berlin Jews were gathered and sent on trains to the camps. Now, I didn't know about this when I made this performance there, but I felt that this place needed a caress, a kindness, needed something to repair to, and that's why I was weaving with a red thread a layer above the landscape as to soften it, but without interfering, on a very gentle, silent way. Silence is a very important part in what I do. I was always interested in something that is called Spaziergangswissenschaft, that is science of walking, which was a term that was invented by Lucius Burckhardt in the 80s and 90s of last century, where he brings together the objective and the subjective, the objective of a science with something subjective as walking, because he sees walking and landscape as something that happens in the mind. You create the landscape by walking it, by observing it, by being in it, by being inside it. And you never do this alone, you do this with others. So that's why Fred, Steph, and I, who are behind Supercluster, a group of people and a course that was organized this summer, started with a group that is called the Fire Pit. And in which today as well you and the people of OICA, media artists and storytellers that are focusing on ecological intelligence, are invited to share with us, with Faye and with me and with each other, your Earth stories. A short story of gratitude about a connection you had with nature. Faye, I would like to let you develop further our conversation.
Thank you, Geert. And Tim, thanks for bringing in the candle. I've just seen you do that. That looks great. You're kind of in the dark, but we can see a slight flickering of your face there. That's brilliant. Thanks, Tim. It looks really super. Bringing the fire to the screen. I like that. And in fact, bringing the fire to the screen is the reason behind this background that I have here. This is a hedge of copper beech that I walk past on my daily walks out and about, and beautifully illuminated, often in the winter sunshine. It often looks like a flame, a hedge of flame as I walk past. So I felt like the copper beech, the flame of the leaves of the copper beech would be my background for the session today. I'd like to thank the Landscape Research Group for this incredible symposia of wonderful events that I'm enjoying very much, and I'm delighted that we're part of that. I also want to say thanks to Zhu, who is slightly in the background, but we'll make sure he makes himself present at the end of the session, who is doing all the right IT stuff for us for the session there as well. He's doing his PhD at the Bartlett at University College London. So I am an archaeologist, an academic. I lecture in landscape archaeology, theoretical archaeology. I'm very much out in the field. I also lecture in ethics and heritage as well. And I'm also from the UCL context as well. My postgrad work very much in landscape archaeology at UCL, where I worked with a really radical group of practitioners at the time who were developing phenomenological methods of working in the field. And from a theoretical and a practical based perspective, their wonderful work. And it was through UCL that I was introduced to the work of Yi-Fu Tuan and many of his writings on senses of place, space and place, and topophilia. And it was topophilia that really caught my attention at the time and informed my work, both as an academic and an archaeologist. I'm also a curator. I like to curate events where I bring in practitioners particularly focused on walking, land art, and writing. Topophilia for Yi-Fu Tuan is the affective bond between people and place or setting, this diffuse concept, vivid and concrete as personal experience, the environmental perception, attitudes and values. Shu, actually, could you start my little film if that's great as an accompaniment to what I'm just about to say? Thank you. The affective bond between people and place or setting, diffuse as a concept, vivid and concrete as personal experience, our environmental perception, attitudes and values. Topophilia. When I was reading Human Goodness, the quote that is the title of our event, The Happy Chance That Gives Rise to Existence, was what caught my attention when I started to think about putting a session together and generating some ideas. And what I would like to do is to read to you the paragraph from Human Goodness, from which that quote comes from. It really sets the scene for why we're doing what we're doing today in this session. Allow me one more take on gratitude. We can be grateful for many things. Come Thanksgiving and Christmas, Americans are grateful for family and friends, turkey dinners and carol singing. Tolstoy would understand, for his novels include many glowing accounts of comparable domestic felicities in Russia. Note the metaphor of the glowing there. But he also urges us to be grateful for something more elemental, for the air, water, fire, and earth that make up nature. But I think there is something even more basic, namely chance, the happy chance that gives rise to existence. Everything that exists seems to me gratuitous, miraculous. Our own universe, which is just one among many, according to the latest theory, is a product of chance, implausibly constituted so as to favor nebula and stars and life. Life in the universe is, however, extremely rare. Complex forms of life are rarer still. Even the favored planet Earth took a very long time, 3 billion years, for evolution to produce multicellular organisms. Nothing in the nature of things guaranteed that evolution would continue to produce ever more complex forms. Yet it did, until somehow dinosaurs appeared. They lorded over the earth. Their dominion could seem permanent, but it was not to be. A cosmic event, a shower of fiery meteors wiped out the dinosaurs, and one consequence of which was that the surviving organisms could radiate adaptively, a process that led eventually to mammals, and yes, to us. So this happy chance that gives rise to existence is beautifully contextualized in the cosmos and fiery meteors and all things that glow. Our plan for the session today is really to embrace that idea, that concept of, quite ancient concept of gathering together around the fire, which in ancient times would serve a purpose for warmth, for heat, for light, to cook food together, to tell stories. And that endures in us now, that allure of the fire that draws us in. I find it fascinating that in this time of pandemic, the great interest everyone has in gathering around fire pits, the invitations you have, come and sit around the fire pit outside in the warmth where we can still gather, is a very powerful one. So we gather around the fire today, the metaphorical fire, the real fire within our spirits, within our souls. And we'd like this conversation to be very organic, like a fire, to glow, to have embers, to spark, to keep us warm and inspire us to tell our earth stories. I just want to quickly outline the 4 sections in human goodness that might be a starting point for some conversations. In a sense, perhaps the fuel for the fire of the conversations in which we're about to have. His first section is on vignettes, on the goodness in our daily lives. The second is the deeds of goodness within us, those good deeds that we do. The third are outstandingly good individuals in our lives, in the past and in the present, and perhaps in the future. And finally, our reflections on the very nature of goodness itself. Thank you, Geert. If you could stop the film there. So we've set the scene, Geert and I, in a sense we've lit the fire, and we're gathered now around this concept, and we invite you to bring your earth stories and contribute to the flames.
To start with, I would like to invite you to speak out your name and speak out your name into the fire. And you can tell us a short memory thought, reflection, what experience you had in nature. And you can do this in your own language to embrace all languages of the world. But if you can start with saying your name, that would be better.
Tracy.
Viv.
Christopher.
Fred.
Enna Sikainen.
Pablo.
Tim.
Iago.
Jordan.
Sarah.
Andrew.
David.
Martina.
David.
Irini. Charlotte.
Farid.
May I share a short story?
Yes, please do, Tracy. Yeah.
It's I just came to me when you were talking through lots of beautiful resonances came to me of fire and connection. And then a reflection came through a memory actually that fire is a place where we congregate, and also at the same time it's something that we need to respect, because like all elements of nature, it's very powerful. And my reflection is, I was sitting here looking into the garden and everything's extremely green at the moment. We've had a lot of rain, but this time last year we were surrounded by bushfires and we couldn't actually go outside because of the smoke. So I sort of, it just came to me, I'm like, oh, it's so beautiful talking about the fire. And then I remembered that 12 months ago, those natural elements were sort of risking and had put into danger, and also caused the loss of many animals and trees. And I know it's probably a little bit out of sync with some of what we're talking about, but I think I feel the need to express a lot of gratitude that today I am looking out into my very green garden full of weeds, and that hopefully this year in Australia we won't have what we had last year. So that's my little reflection. But thank you for opening up the space.
May I share today's her story.
That would be great, Fred. We'd love to hear it.
Yes, because I really enjoyed today. So the wind was very strong, and I just wanted to go outdoors and record the sound of the wind. And there is a place I like to go very much. It's a wooden hut in a bird reserve. It was quite broken some years ago, and I'm spending a lot of time at this place. And in this wooden hut, you have a small hole in the wall, the wooden hole, and with a kind of a tube. And then when the wind comes against the wall, it enters into a very small hole, and it makes a sound like music. No, it's like the wind as a singer. And then I went to the wooden hut by bike, very excited with my audio recording to record this song I was expecting, because here in the Mediterranean, because we don't have so much strong wind in my area. And when I arrived and entered into the wooden hut, it was very silent because the wind didn't go exactly in the direction I imagined, and then the wooden hut was not singing. But I started to see a little bit because some air entered, and then there were a lot of particles of dust in the air. And there was a very small hole in the window, and then some light entered. And I was just amazed by this beauty of this dust, like sparkle of a fire. No? And I was very grateful, because I entered into this space expecting for a kind of interaction, and it was really different. And our stories really work like this, it's not like you have an idea in your mind, you go in nature and you get what you have in mind. No, you have just to let the story unfold from your interaction, your moment in nature, the story unfold or not. But it's very important to be totally open to this story to emerge, and not have a previous idea in mind. So yeah, I'm very grateful for the creativity of the world, and everywhere we are looking around, it's a kind of beautiful emerging stories waiting for us and for our interaction. So yeah, it was a beautiful day today.
Feel free to unmute yourself. You are unmuted now. So if you want to share some thoughts, ideas about what Faye so beautifully read, or personal reflections, feel free to do so.
We would also like to say that the silence is part of the gathering. Sitting around the fire, the moment allowed to contemplate, to ponder on what's just been said, to take time to just feel warm and feel the human goodness, if we want to take our lead for today.
I wonder if I might share a poem I wrote in my youth. Would that be appropriate?
That would be great, Tim. Thank you.
This is from a time when I lived in Olympia, Washington, at the south end of Puget Sound. And I used to be able to walk down through the temperate rainforest with the moss dripping off the trees and go to swim in the water. And often there was bioluminescence in the water. So your limbs would light up as you moved through the water. Just a really wonderful experience. And this poem was written actually after I had gone to the beach alone. So basically feeling my way to the beach through the dark forest. And I built a fire on the beach and swum in the wintertime when it was cold and warmed myself over the beach. So this poem's kind of a fantasy about that. And let me find it here. So in fact, the night falls during the course of the poem rather than me going to the beach. And here it is. It has no title. I'm in the beach where clams jet spit from their subterranean layers. Their juice trickles on my barnacles, clicking to rocks, slice my soles like little blades. I pock the mud red. I'm hallucinating. What do I care? The sun jangles, jazzes the air, and electric. I can jiggle this way till dawn, dawn, dawn of the deep that arises around the sandbar. I sit. My toes are black. The water is black. It rises. The moon rises. I rise and let its tongue that dangles in black lick the blood from my feet, and the sea's nightlight luminescence turns my black feet to proud green, sparkling joys. And when jellyfish brush my legs, color streams from their bodies like little novas. Or is it the stars themselves, resting in this cool water from billions of years of burning? I would rest myself, but I am stuck on this sandbar, tripping.
That's wonderful, Tim. Such a lovely, strong visual imagery I get there, and the lovely sandbar. Wonderful piece of cartography to bring into our discussion today.
Me at about 19 years old, I think.
Yes, I was about to say, how does it feel reading the words of your 19-year-old self around the fire pit?
Definitely an odd feeling. Another time and another universe.
Does it bring a sense, a feeling of goodness, of human goodness when you read it?
Yeah, it's funny because it's about a solitary experience. And one line that really struck me from earlier this week in the presentation about Palestinian landscapes is Omar Hamidat came on and he said, goodness is to be found in the act of sharing. But I think even solitary experiences in the landscape, we need to talk about them afterwards. Solitude is something that we experience, but then of course we come back to sociality and share the understandings we've gained from our experience of solitude. I'm not sure whether that's profound or just wonderfully mundane.
Or both.
Yes.
You talk about that as a solitary experience, and interestingly, I had a similar experience at a similar age, and it was profound in the moment for me, I would say, and I'm guessing since you felt compelled to write a poem about your experience in that landscape, it was profound to you as well. And I think something profound continues to be profound even as we grow older and realize that our solitary experience may actually be a collective experience, because as you and I have shared this experience, maybe on different parts of the globe. That happened to me in North Carolina, where I experienced bioluminescence at the seashore. But we still become connected through experience, and that experience in the landscape. And I'm even thinking about, Geert, your video with the line connecting people in a landscape physically even. And right now I'm in Montauk, New York. Those of you that know me, I live in New York City, but I'm actually out here taking care of this property that my grandparents actually built this place back many years ago before I was born. They built one of the original beach bungalows in Montauk, which is a very remote part of Long Island in New York. And even before there was electricity on the road, and then it became my father's place, and now my father has passed away, and it is my sister and I's place. And just this morning, I'm outside working on the yard, clearing out all of the growth from the summer and that kind of thing. And I'm thinking of my father and my grandfather, who I have done this action, this shared experience in a landscape with them for almost all of my life. And the connection through that experience and through that gesture in a landscape, this sort of, I hate to think of it as a battle with nature, but in a certain way it is. My father planted bamboo, which is an invasive species. It's beautiful, it's amazing, but it is also invasive, and I have to whack it back. But this is something that we've been doing for generations. And it's something in this land that we've been doing for generations. And as I swing the machete, I think of how my dad taught me how to swing the machete, and I look forward to, hopefully in this place, in this geography, on this land, teaching my sister's children how to swing a machete and fight back the invasive bamboo that my father had planted here. That's not profound, that's just a story.
But it's
open up a question. I would open up a question of like the connection we were talking about, you know, the fire pit as a place for stories and earth stories. In some way, all our stories will be human stories because we're humans, and we can't sort of avoid the fact that we experience the earth through our experiences. And yet even our solitary experiences have the opportunity to be connected experiences. I'm working alone in the yard, but I'm connected with my grandfather and my father. Tim is still talking about a poem about bioluminescence, but I'm connected to Tim through this shared experience in the landscape with nature. And I'm especially interested in, as we're all becoming more able to connect with each other through these technological tools like Zoom that's been accelerated by COVID, how can we also still use this space to share landscape intimacies and collective experiences? Like I'm thinking even Geert, like you drawing the thing. Next time I see a pond with the scum, I'm going to be sharing that experience with you. I'm sticking my finger in and I'm drawing in the pond the algae there. Has anyone else had an experience with connecting with people through a shared gesture in a landscape, even though you may not share the landscape?
Yeah, so this is central to my work. So as a landscape archaeologist and a theoretical landscape archaeologist, I step into landscapes, into places that we know people in the past, and sometimes in the very deep past, inhabited that space, dwelt in that space, walked in that space, scythed bracken in that space, farmed, built walls, kept animals. We have this whole wonderful data set of people's past activities. My work in phenomenology is a way of thinking about our shared corporealities, our bodies in that space. And is it possible through me, through my body, walking through spaces, standing at the doorway of a Bronze Age roundhouse and taking in the view as a shared experience? Doesn't mean I have the same feelings, doesn't mean I can't read the minds of people in the past. I can share the space that was created by people thousands of years ago through the architecture that they built, or through the rock inscriptions that they made on the volcanic crater in Armenia that I worked in one summer, looking at the rock art there, or ancient carvings in deserts in the Middle East, routeways, wayfinding characteristics. So from my perspective, yes, through that corporeality, through our bodily experience. And it raises a question, it's a great one. I love that quotidian act of the scything of the bamboo there, Chris. That there was a response to Tim's poem from Rich, which was in the chat, which was that he wasn't sure there was anything that the idea of a solitary experience perhaps doesn't exist. It was you shared the experience with the clams, with the nature, with everything around you. So the very idea of that solitariness is an interesting one as well, I suppose, from what particular standpoint that you take.
I have a couple of comments, not actually stories, but brought up by these thoughts, which I'm really interested in. One of my practices is to do solitary walks where I sing a memory of a walk that I took in the same place with someone else. And that's sort of very, very much the idea of being solitary, but holding a presence of another person in mind while I'm singing. And I'm also singing with the landscape that I'm walking through as well. But something else that just happened now is that, Christopher, you're just up the road from me, because I'm also based in New York City, and in March I moved to Sag Harbor, just down the road. And I have to say that, you know, I'm a city person. I very much like the buzz of a city, and I wasn't sure how it was going to be for me to be, you know, in nature and the kind of the sort of countryside. I mean, not exactly countryside, but you know what I mean. It's definitely not a city. And it's been such a sort of a treasure to have the beach 2 streets away. And my shortest way of getting to town is actually along the beach. And so I've done a beach walk every single day since March. I don't think I've missed a single day. And that has just been like, the beach has just been restoring me and sort of giving me all these delights. And I suppose watching the seasons go by, and watching the fact that even within a season, every day is slightly different on the beach. I mean, that's such a banal thing to say. And of course I knew that, but I didn't really know it. And I feel like I've been given that, you know, that sort of gentleness in a way, the gentleness that Geert was talking about, that he wants to extend to the landscape. I feel the landscape has been giving it to me just by showing me little things, you know. Oh, there's that group of gulls, and they always stand at exactly this part of the high tide. Every single day, they all just stand there, and I know why, because I've watched these shellfish coming in, and all those kind of things. And I'll stop rambling on now.
If I may react on what you said, Viv, and as well on your story, Faye, with a story that actually I have given you some months ago, which reminded me exactly about that I love to make solitary walks, and I was some years ago, I was in the Alps, completely alone for many weeks, and every day making a long walk. And on one of these days, I got completely lost. And eventually I found, after hours and hours of walking around without having any point of reference, I came at a very old, small Roman bridge. And I was exhausted. So it was very hot, and it was midday, so I decided to take a nap close to the bridge at the waterside. And I immediately fell asleep in a very deep sleep. Starting to have dreams and being in completely another world. Suddenly I felt on something tickling, something something very very gentle, all over my skin, and which brought me back from the sleep into the reality. And when I opened slowly my eyes, I was covered with butterflies that were drinking my sweat, which were thirsty for fluid, and came to sit on me and to drink from me, literally. And it was such I was sort of scared from because I didn't expect this. I expected all this tickling. I expected something hostile, instead of something so gentle and warm that came to me. So I made a sudden movement, and the butterflies went all off. But when I was waking up, I suddenly didn't feel alone anymore, even after that wandering around so many hours, being somewhere that I didn't know if I would ever get out. But I felt that there was a presence, that I was not alone, which comforted me. And eventually I walked off and I found a path back. On other walks that I made the days after, I never found this place again. So it was very, very curious, even if I was walking there for weeks. So I agree with you that you are never alone. There is something very old, as you said. There is a presence that not only from human beings, but from nature as well, that is accompanying us. There is I heard a scientist tell once, and the scientists among you may correct me or may add something to that, who said it's not only that we are having to abandon the idea that we as human beings are closer to the non-human beings, animals, than we think, that not only animals have a consciousness and actually an intelligence that is closer to us than we expected, but as well that we are much closer to plants than we ever thought. That actually 40% of our genetic material is organic. So for 40%, we are still plants. And plants as well, there's a nature, vegetal life as well has a consciousness, has a presence that is always around us, and that is very old. So it's going even further than just human archaic presence, but we are connected through time with the beginning of everything.
Last summer, I was in Turkey walking in a landscape, solitary walking, and visiting repeatedly the site of Karnous, which is a huge Roman amphitheatre, and it really feels like in the middle of nowhere. There's a small town nearby. And part of my work there was repeated visits and approaching the site from different places, different angles, different perspectives. And it was very hot. So once I arrived in Karnous at different times of the day, I would take a rest under one olive tree that grew in the Roman amphitheatre. And it was pretty much always there on my own, which was amazing. On one of these days, just to lead on from your beautiful butterfly story there, Geert, I was awoken by a tickling on my foot. And when I looked down, there was a very large tortoise tickling my foot with the tortoise foot. And then started to walk off. So I decided to go for a walk with the tortoise, and the tortoise to lead the way. And it was wonderful. And tortoises can walk really quite fast, actually. And it took me to places, it kind of gave me a guided tour of the site through its own cartography, its own embodied cartography. And I walked in places that I would not have trod were it not for the tortoise taking me there. Mm-hmm.
I think there's a story about a flaneur in Paris who took a tortoise walking on a lead through Paris so that he would get the appropriate pace for appreciating the city. I wish I could remember where the story is from. It's probably Baudelaire or something quite obvious, which I'm embarrassed to say I've forgotten.
I like that, Tim. That's great. Yes.
So I have a story that I'd like to share, sort of springboarding from butterflies and interactions with animals. We often think that there's a certain peace that we can find from nature. And I mean, you know, and this is a very important thing for us to go searching for that. But there's also the opposite. There's agony. I used to work in construction on highways for a small little construction firm. And these were remote highways in Northern Ontario. And our season used to begin in May. And I don't know if you've ever been in Northern Ontario. in the springtime, but you'll know that there are these creatures, these ferocious creatures called black flies. Yeah, in Northern Ontario, they are nothing short of apocalyptic. So that first day was awful, driving back from our back to our hotel after that first day. Yeah, see, black flies, they're not like mosquitoes. They don't sting, right? They bite and they chew and they gnaw. So it's very, very painful. But that next day, you know, obviously I didn't want to go to work, but, you know, I had to make a living. And we're out there on the highway and you can hear the hum just sort of brewing in the swamp just beside us. And yeah, and then there they go, they attack, and these black flies are just covered, we're just covered in black flies. But then it happened, these dragonflies came out of nowhere. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dragonflies just came out of nowhere, and they started picking off all the black flies off of my skin. And for that entire day, they just swirled and swirled and swirled around. And I mean, from my perspective, they were protecting me, right? And, you know, for years, I thought of this as like this sort of like this spiritual moment, you know, this something that, you know, truly divine was happening here. But then it occurred to me, I mean, this is just nature doing what nature does, right? There's nothing, I don't know, spiritual about it. But in terms of sort of finding this connectivity with nature, I mean, like I grew up in the woods, you know, it's like this is, you know, this idea of, you know, being connected with nature is, you know, was not new to me, but there was something a lot more profound. And I think it's because I encountered the fact that nature was causing me to suffer in as much as it was causing my salvation. And out of that, there was just this depth, this profound depth of my being that sort of swelled from that moment. So anyway, thanks for listening.
David, can I just say that's really profound, the suffering and the salvation, that really, for me, deeply connected to what I was trying to express earlier. So thank you for that, because that's the world that we live in, isn't it? We've got all of that polarity and also everything in between that we can see and experience and be within. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for this warmly told story. We'll need to let the fire burn on its own and to start to round up our stories. We would like to invite you one or two, maybe more stories before to leave the world and to go back in the outside.
We've got something from Moira here. Hello, Moira. Ju, I wonder if is it possible to share Moira's Google Docs? So the message from Moira is, hi everyone, I have a disability-centered poem to share about missing being with the earth and yet being with it. I'm going to try and share it with you via Google Docs. Apologies to all. I'm unable to speak due to breathing difficulties today. So Ju, is it possible in the chat to have a look at Moira's document there?
I try and it shows
come.
the size. I don't get that.
Moira, I'm not sure we can share it, which is a
Yeah, it shows that I need to apply for the exercise, and I just applied.
okay.
I can give me the exercise and share that.
All right, hang on a second, Moira. It looks like we might be able to. That's okay, Moira. Let's see if we can. It looks as if, Moira, I'm sorry, it doesn't seem possible to be able to share your document, which is, we've just been trying valiantly to do that. Thank you, Ju. We haven't been able to share the document. I'm sorry to say, but we tried, and we feel your intention, and we very much feel your presence around the fire with us. So thanks, Moira. It's very much appreciated.
And indeed, thank you, Moira, for your poem that I could read, actually. And, it's very beautifully, visually and verbally written. We can send it after for the people that would like to read it. We'll need to get leaving the fire burning till we come back next time. And if somebody wants to tell a last story, this is very much welcomed. Who wants to give us a goodbye story? Ruth? Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just listening to so many of the things. Thank you. It's my first fire pit that I've been to. So thank you for the invite. Can you hear me okay? I've got a bit of a dodgy computer connection here. Yeah, I was thinking with the links with ancestors, with memories, with the animals, that suddenly, just as you're wandering, feeling a little bit, maybe a bit alone, or you're not quite sure of something, and just a little animal hops up next to you and catches you and just somehow just transports you along and just gives you that extra boost and energy. And there are a lot of connections. And there's one particular walk with lockdown. I've been walking it for years. I've done artworks on it where I've studied the tracks, taken ground rubbings of the ground. I've crawled along it as if I was an ant and photographed it from the viewpoint of that. And so I know it really well. And it's in fields. It surrounds an ancient hill fort around not far from me, and I've been walking it a lot recently, and just recently it's been giving me food, and I've actually got some here, loads and loads of windfall apples, and they're absolutely huge. I've got bagfuls. So in terms of thinking like place, it's somewhere, you know, I just know this place so well, and I walked it the other night. I set off a bit late and it was sunset, so it ended up moonlight, and it was the most enormous kind of glowing orange full moon. And I was there scrabbling around in the dark trying to pick apples before they all disappear. And it's just in a farmer's field, and he's just got more than he needs. So he's quite happy for people to pick them. So I've been able to give them to friends, to family, to neighbours. So it's that idea that, you know, a walk that I've studied. And when I finished it, I was just by the moonlight before I came home. And a couple of deer came down from the top of the hill, and I could just see them silhouetted. And a heron flew in and then took off. And it just, that kind of thing just magically captures you. So it has got that link to kind of what were the tracks used for in the past, who walked them. I've got personal memories of walking it with friends, with family. There's just so many connections there, and now it's feeding me in lockdown. So and they're delicious as well. So it just made me, yeah. Same with, I've got invisible walnuts as well from somebody who planted some walnut trees, but I've eaten all of them, so I haven't got any. There's like a little smile path around the bottom of one of the trees where people walked round and round it to gathering the walnuts. And it was, again, they were just planted by a villager for people to go and collect. So yeah, it's that connections to the land. But thank you all. It's been a wonderful, my first fire pit with you all.
Oh, thanks, Ruth. That's a lovely story. That's a lovely earth story, and sharing an apple is even better. Really. I like the idea of invisible walnuts as well. That's good.
Yeah, I'd have that if it was the real fire. I could hand them out.
Yeah. All these wonderful happy chances that we've been talking about this evening. The happy chances that give rise to existence, the existence of us gathering around the fire pit together. I can feel the warmth, which is a beautiful thing. Yeah.
So, thank you all for being here.
Thank you for joining us around the fire, and I hope it inspires you to ignite your own flames in whatever way you would like to do that. And thank you again to the Landscape Research Group. And Ji, would you like to show us you so that we can all see you, to say thanks to you as well?
Hi, everyone.
Keeping it.
Thank you, Faye, and thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. You've been great. Thank you so much for all your help. Yes.
Okay, I will stop recording and later we will post the whole record on the website. Okay, thank you all for coming.